Good evening to all of you. Of course, good morning to Sam. Sam is doing this out of New Jersey. Um, welcome to you all for this IDC talk number 33. We have with us Samudra Sen, more popularly known as Sam. I mean, if I say Samudra Sen, people may not know, but if I say Sam, I think they can correct better. Sam is a alumnus of IDC. He passed out in 1992. He specialized in product design. Sam has a very interesting, entrepreneurship journey. He moved very early on in his career. He moved to the what is today called at Edu-tech. He moved to the Edu-tech world even before this term was in practice. Uh, he is he did, of course, some stint. He worked for organizations and then decided that he would be on his own. I mean, somewhere in early 2000, 2003 to be very precise, and built this fantastic organization called the LearningMate, which is now 19 plus years old, as what he mentioned yesterday, which is very it's a very amazing thing. Those who are more in tune with the startup world will realize that any startup which crosses first year is big, crosses 3 years is very big, and anything that crosses 5 years is huge. And here is a story. Here's a organization which has not only passed all the tests of the startup, but established itself as a brand which is grown and growing with a huge set of customers and also users. It's a very complex business, as I understand. There is a content side to it. There is a huge tech side to it because it's a tech-led business, and there is a whole lot of regulations because we are dealing with education. And Sam has, I mean, we should be very proud that Sam has steadied a ship in a very complex context. He has weathered two very big crises: the 2008 crisis and then the latest COVID crisis, and still going strong and good and great. And it's amazing to see how this organization has evolved. And this is a story that Sam is going to speak. And more importantly is from the discussion that we have had, he very strongly believes that what has helped him grow this organization has been the design thinking, the design process, and he as a designer could distinguish himself from probably several entrepreneurs who traditionally have a huge management and business point of view. So he feels that design has been a big tool and also a great mechanism that he was able to deploy to actually grow this organization, which I think is a very interesting trait. And I think that through and through, whatever little that I've known of what he's going to speak, there is a great deal of empathy. I mean, empathy to people he works with, empathy to the customers, and empathy to each and every aspect of human interaction. That's part of this whole thing, which is amazing, I think. And like all of you, I'm too eager to listen to Sam, and without taking too much of his time, I'm handing over the session to you. Sam, it's all yours.
Thank you, Ravi, and hello to everyone. Let me just first, I have a few talking points and slides that I just wanted to keep front and center. Can you see my screen?
It's just coming up. It's just coming up.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
All right. Hi everyone. Like Ravi said, I'm from the batch of 1992 product design, and IDC was one of the 2 years I spent over there. One of the most formative years of our life, because like many of you, It takes out the fear of thinking radically different. And I think that's the greatest gift that I've actually got, to look at something which is completely unknown from a lens of a designer, and look at the problem and then think about how you can solve that. The story I'm going to tell you today is about the company that we started. And This is basically about education, right? And while you talk about edtech or edutech, the way you would basically want to look at it, I think education is a field that is an extremely motivating field for us, and that's also the reason we chose it. My prior experience was working in Crompton Greaves and then in Larsen and Toubro. And then prior to this, I had worked in I had two other startups before founding LearningMate. So that's been through a very checkered history before I set up this company. What I'm going to basically, talk about is a couple of points along the journey, and I hope it kind of helps all of you. Let this be a more interactive session, if you will. And I started. I'll cover how you basically. I set up the initial team. The biggest thing in starting a business is capital, and how do you beat the constraints of capital? Because why do you need capital to hire a team to build a product with that team, and how do you basically do that? Second thing I wanted to focus on is when you start getting customers, not just signing up customers, but being creative in constructing deals, very important. um, and product development, which is one of the core things that we do. How do you do that without spending too much of money? Then how do you shift strategies? Because the market is always transforming. So I have a story on that, where many times in the life of the business, we've been at a point where we were not growing, or we were stagnating, or we were losing profits or revenues to customers. You have to literally sit back and think, do I give up, or do I basically transform the company, and is there a chance to make it, right? So those are momentous decisions during the life of a company that you want to do. Then, of course, when you're setting it up for scale, you also have to think of your execution and organization structure. And then we'll end with a little bit on my experience in raising capital and investor deals, and creative deal making, and working on a win-win model. I've been through 4 private equity rounds, raised tremendous, lot of capital in Mill, and we'll talk about that experience as well, right? And Of course, the graphic on the side talks about the philosophy we have. The real risk is doing nothing, right? Long back. So I will basically, first give you a quick introduction of the company, and then, move on. What we do as a company in the EdTech space is, we are the largest digital enablement provider to universities, schools, government departments of education, large, EdTech companies that you often hear of, like Emeritus, or in Asia, but largely we are a US-based business. So we work with all the big EdTech brands here, all the large universities, all the large schools. What we do for them is 2 things: content and technology services across the education life cycle. So right from the time you are planning your curriculum, to building out the content, to curating the content, and then providing an analytics back to the school. We do this entire life cycle, as you can see on the right hand side. and we use our content team as well as our technology platforms and technology teams to enable all of this for schools, colleges, universities, right? So that's a very simple, high-level definition. We work in higher education, K-12, and government departments of education, and a little bit in the corporate world, but we are largely a education-focused company. Uh, and we've kind of impacted the world in different ways. If you want to kind of look at it, today we have almost 5+ million students that access our platforms that we have built for our customers, and we build those platforms, we run those platforms, and that's the average kind of student population that we manage. Uh, Almost 4 million plus students are served by our data systems and analytics solutions across the US. And, we work with over now 350 client partners across the last many years, right? Um, and then the company, of course, has been growing well and all of that. We've, as I said, gone through 4 rounds of private equity. Uh, and, we've been able to return a large amount of capital to our investors. So if you kind of invested $1 in LearningMate in 2003, that would be $300 today, and so on and so forth, right? And today we are about 2,000 people, 1,500 full-time employees, and 500 contractual across almost 6 locations that we are present in. So that's a very brief intro of the company. These are, some of our client lists, as you can see in K-12 higher education workforce. I won't focus on this too much, but, all sorts of clients from all sorts of Edtech logos in the US, and what we have done for them. I think the purpose, why did we start the company, was we recognized way back in 2002, when we were just starting off and I had left my job at Edtech, is education is an underserved sector in 2003. Technology had impacted banking, retail, logistics, all of these areas. But, when I looked at education, I found that, there was no tech in the classroom, right? There was no tech in the universities. And therefore, I thought that this is such a big sector. It is even bigger than banking in terms of spend, in terms of government funding, in terms of people's aspiration to get their kids educated. And technology should make an impact, and it's highly underserved at this point. So we chose education and Edtech, therefore, as an area that we wanted to go in. Prior to that, I had set up Aptech's corporate e-learning division, and therefore, I had some sense of what e-learning would be. But when Aptech decided to hive up the e-learning division to another venture capital firm, I decided to leave with a group of people to set up LearningMate. And then, some of our motivations also were that we wanted to create an equitable platform, because if there's one thing that can change society, that can change the world, it is education. And the issue is, we are fortunate, all of us on this call, that we had the opportunity to get educated. Many people can't. And one of my favorite lines are hashtag same starting line, right? If you can create the same starting line for everybody, you create equal opportunity, truly. Enhance the learning experience, of course, and then data-driven decision making for kids. So, for example, if somebody had told me early on in my life not to do engineering because I was a horrible engineer, I would have never gone for it. I just went up for it because of peer pressure, right? So there was no data, there was nothing to tell me that what I was good at, right, or what I would be successful in. So I think we've done a lot of data and analytics work in education, which is making an impact today. Okay, so I think coming to the meat of it, when I was talking of my first point, how do you basically start a company? And my experience, I can relate to you, is I come from a very middle class family. My father was retired. I just lost my mother when I was thinking of starting LearningMate. All these pictures that you see over here, these are my co-founders, right? all of them used to work, most of them used to work in a company called Edtech. Two of them, came from external sources, but very close friends. But what each of them got to the table was a set of different skills. So, for example, if I'm not sure if you've seen my cursor, Abhijit Sethi, this guy on the left-hand side, he's our head of sales. He and most of these guys, right, who came to LearningMate, or we decided to start the company together. We started out of my house, out of my bedroom, um, and what was more important for us was a shared belief and a shared vision. So it took hours and hours and hours of discussion as to what exactly our mission and why did we want to do what we wanted to do. So I think alignment of that is extremely important. I can tell you all these guys signed up for free, right? So I did not need capital to start the company, because what I had tremendous commitment. And it was a very unique combination of people who wanted to do something in life. All of these guys come from middle class backgrounds. The second thing I did not focus on, people tell that to start a company, you have to hire the best team in the world, the most experienced team in the world. I don't believe any of that, right? All of these guys, many of these guys, like my CFO, Mihir Damniwala, was a fresher out of college. Abhijit Sethi, he didn't have huge amount of IM degrees or MBA degrees. I mean, he was hungry, he had great attitude, and he was hungry to do something. Nachiket Padatkar over here, as you can see. Can you see my cursor, guys? I mean, hopefully, I'm trying to do pointers here, but Nachiket Padatkar was also fresh out of college. So many of these guys were fresh out of college or didn't have the kind of CV that would say that they're fit to lead CFO or CEO roles or things like that. But I think in my life, I have backed attitude and ambition over experience, right? And that's something that you need to do, because this was a team which was highly motivated, hungry, ready to go out there and experience whatever it took. The second thing is that, when you pick your team, also look for the same kind of values that you have. Same kind of background, the middle class values, all of those things became very important. So this team, these 7 people, started in 2003, and these 7 people work together even today, right? It is unheard of, right? 2 brothers can't work in a business for even 3, 4, 5 years. So I'm telling you that what I'm trying to tell you is, your team is your capital, right? And how you construct the team and you pick your team is extremely important. You have to pick the best guys you can spend your life with, right? And then once you pick your team, here's the thing, right? You should be big enough to share equity with them in the company, right? Because you can't pay them, right? And when I say equity, means it is actually shares of the company, right? Each of these guys, while I hold a little more shares in the company than some of them, I'm just the first amongst equals. They almost have equal shareholding or a little less than me. So you have to basically make it an equitable structure. They have to feel equally invested as you are invested in your company, right? So I'll always say that always pick your team before you go and think of capital. Always share a dream. Always have people with common beliefs and value systems. Pick attitude and ambition over experience. So that's the fundamental starting point. You can see some pictures of our initial days in smaller offices. We started off in my house, moved to a 200 square feet office in the basement of a bungalow. And then from there, as business grew to a slightly larger office, and then, today we have a very large infrastructure. So that's the first thing that I wanted to talk about. I put a slide on core value systems, because when you form a team, it has to be rock solid and solid. Um, you got to have shareholder agreements between your team members. It's not just a set of friends getting together. So there are legal agreements, there are binding agreements. But though once you sign those agreements, those should be in the background, right? What is important is for you guys to have common beliefs. And for us, how do you basically in the gray box on the right hand side, right? How do you demonstrate those beliefs? So on day zero, right, we decided we want to be audited by the big five auditors, right? Our auditing and our finance and our things should be above question. So I actually went and sat, I knew somebody in Ernst & Young, I went and sat outside the Ernst & Young office. Those guys even told me that you can't even afford my fees. Why are you sitting here? Because you don't have any revenues and you hardly have anything and we can't work with you. But you have to be persistent, right? You have to make sure that you get what you want. So I went back there 4 or 5 times before Ernst & Young agreed to sign my balance sheet, and convinced them that they, of course, they earn a lot of money today, but they have been my auditors from day zero, of course. And then we changed auditors to KPMG. We got KPMG in the same way as our tax advisors. So have the highest governance and transparency with your team about money, right? This is core to your value system. We also had very middle class value systems. We didn't have any company car. Of course, we didn't have money, so there was nothing. But even in the later years, when we started making money, profits, none of us took dividends out of the company. We did not basically take any profits out of the company. We all traveled the same class. Even now, the junior most programmer and me stay in the same hotels. We travel, the same class, like economic class, even when we are $100 million in size today. So those value systems cannot go away, right? And you cannot, change those value systems so far. So there are certain things that, you need to basically believe in and behave and demonstrate that behavior and not just pay lip service to it. When you say transparency, get the best auditors. When you say, get the right tax advisors and all of those things. So bootstrapping to stability is one thing that I really wanted to talk about. How do you basically acquire your initial customers, right? So, we were this little unknown company out of India, in our initial days. How do you survive? This basically started out of my house, one computer, 7 guys. We just needed work, right? So we had these grand plans of what Edtech should be and what platform we should build. The first thing is, how do you fund your business, right? So we went and said, we will do two things. Let's start acquiring customers and what is work for cash, right? These are non-strategic projects, but projects that we could do, right? That we wanted to do profitably and fund the business. So we did a few projects in India, as you can see. We did multimedia games for kids who never saw a computer in India for the Azim Premji Foundation. We worked for the government of Andhra Pradesh through somebody we knew to create a literacy program, worked with the United Nations and Blackboard. So these are things that came to us through our contacts, right? But the big break for us is we knew that our mature market was in the US, but how do you go and break into the US? Because hiring somebody in the US is tremendously costly, right? I mean, fail with that, you can shut your business, and we had no money, right? So at the end of it, I think, through some networks, we got to know that there was this company called Blackboard. Blackboard is a very large learning management systems company. And they had sold their platform to mostly all universities in the US. They were the leading Edtech brand in those times. So my idea was to tell Blackboard that, look, wherever you're selling your platform, I can go to that college or university and help the professor and the students and the administration use your platform better. I can put content on it. I can support them. I can do all the professional services around that. But how do you go and meet the CEO of such a big company, right? You have to find a way in doing that. So when you kind of did, when I thought of that, right, I found through some contacts somebody who had invested in Blackboard, got introduced to that person. That person was the managing director of Carlyle, and I'll talk about Carlyle a little later. And he introduced me to the CEO of Blackboard. With whatever little money we had, I flew to Washington, D.C., and my partner Mohit, who was based out of the US, joined me there. Um, and As we were negotiating with Blackboard, and it was a half an hour meeting, it turned into a 3-hour meeting because we showed the CEO what we could do with their platform. It became evident to them that we knew their platform inside out, right? And he asked me at the end of the meeting, what do you want? And I said, I want an agreement with you that I'll be your exclusive professional services partner. He said, fine, here is my senior vice president who will negotiate with you. And in that meeting, at the end of that meeting, the senior VP gave me a term sheet which said that you will never sell in the United States directly to a university except through Blackboard. And that was like signing away my dream. I was out of money. I had we were like almost 3-4 months into the business. Patience was running out. Everybody comes from middle-class families, right? If we signed that deal, it would mean millions of dollars. But if you signed that deal, it would also mean giving your dream away. So always, I think you need to do the right thing. We came out, we didn't sign the deal. And when I was sitting in the coffee shop below that Blackboard office, I spoke to my colleague Mohit, and the next thing we did was we called up that senior vice president who was negotiating with us at Blackboard out for lunch. And I didn't know what happened, but I told him, why don't you move over from Blackboard and join us? Although we have no money, but we can do a lot of work together. So it is very important that you think out of the box, right? This is something which I can connect it to design thinking, but when you are negotiating with somebody and the negotiation fails, and the guy on the other side is valuable, you also know that you don't have the money to afford him because he was making like $200,000 in Blackboard, and you can't pay him $200,000. I still pitched him a job, right? And he was shocked, right? I said, look, I don't have the money to pay you, but we can work on, to get me a deal, I can give you 10% of the deal or whatever. I can cover your travel costs to some extent. All of this put together, right, took me 6 phone calls to convince this guy to move over and join a startup which was not even making money. And his name was David Kyle, and he said, I don't know why I'm doing this, but I'm doing this. And I said, David, if you join me, you'll have the ride of your life. David worked for us for 6 years, and when he retired, right, when he left the company, he said, this is the best time of my life I've had. So that's how I hired my salespeople. The second guy I hired was Paul Martin. He was working for Pearson in America South, a most successful salesperson, graduate of MIT, exchange student at JNU. Smart guy. I met him, and again on my trip to DC, I pitched him the same thing. So my initial hires in the US were done at extremely low cost but high motivation, right? And I was willing to share back money with them, which was disproportionate in terms of the deals they got us. So that's the number one thing. Again, get your founding team, your initial sales team. And when David Kyle called customers, right, he was the senior VP of Blackboard, extremely well known in the industry. He called my first customer, which is Elsevier, the largest medical publisher in the world. They just bought Blackboard, and they said, look, I've joined this company, and they can do amazing work on your platform. And suddenly we had a huge contract from Elsevier because David Kyle was on our team. He got us the credibility, and so on and so forth, right? So that's how our first contract in the US came through, and our breakthrough in the US came through. Of course, after that, David and Paul took us to some other clients, and then we started tapping the right networks. Also, we had a set of senior advisors who we basically could reach out to for free. So that was um, about acquiring customers and generating cash. Then, of course, we went for our first round of angel funding. This was a company that was in the education space. Of course, it's no longer exists, called Educom. They put in $300,000 of capital into our company. And the way we basically got to this company is through a common friend. They were thinking of setting up an e-learning company. I said, why don't you invest over here? So that initial round of capital came through a very funny circumstance, right? When I went and pitched to Educom, they took me to their investor, Carlyle. Now, Carlyle Ventures was a company which is the largest private equity company in the world. And Carlyle told me, look, we can't fund you directly, but Educom can do an angel funding in you for 300,000. But if you basically achieve ABC things like this much revenue, this much profits in the next 2 or 3 years, come back to us and we'll talk, right? And I kept that in my mind. But as we basically got the first round of angel funding, we basically said that, look, we are not going to blow up this $300,000. We are going to keep it in the bank. We are not going to withdraw a salary, but we are going to only take whatever is required by each of us. And again, these are the values in the founding team that's important. You won't believe we stretched that $300,000. You could blow it up in like 4 or 6 months. We stretched it for 1.5 years. How you basically conserve cash and you have financial discipline and you also do profitable deals, which is basically fund your business through client projects, extremely important. And then I think in the early stages, we also realized that after taking the angel funding, the value systems didn't match with our investor, right? Because we were very high on corporate governance. Our investor had very different ideas. So we had to correct that mistake really quick. And what happened was that our business was taking off with all these things. We had Elsevier as our first client. Pearson became our next client. I went back to Carlyle and I said, you had asked me to achieve 1, 2, 3, 4 things. Why don't you give me funding directly? So ultimately what happened was Carlyle funded us and, we were well on our way to, we gave Educomp an exit, and Carlyle put about $1 million only into the company. About 300 went to Educomp, $700,000 came into LearningMate. So LearningMate's growth has been through this $700,000 as the primary capital in the company. Later on, I will talk of some large private equity deals that happened, but that was really one investor buying out the other investor's shares, no money into the company. So fundamentally, we built the company to $100 million in size with $700,000 in capital, right? And that is financial discipline is extremely important the way you do these things. And then the final thing is the disruptive innovation piece, right? I spoke about Blackboard, and putting content on Blackboard was a huge issue for universities. They were spending thousands of dollars putting courses on Blackboard. We created a tremendously easy automated platform to do that, change the dynamics of that. We brought down costs from $2,000 to $200, all of that. We basically built the first adaptive learning platform on top of Blackboard. The Blackboard guys were really upset with us at losing our partnership later on. But, we did a lot of business on the platform and then, made simulation engines. These are very disruptive things way back in 2004, 5, and things like that. Now, I just wanted to talk about the second phase of our company. This graph actually shows, our company growth from 2003, which is 2004 was the first audited results. Till 2009, we were just a $6 million company, right? Now in 2009, I basically, looked at the nature of the company. It was largely a content company, right? which means we were doing online learning courses, much like many other companies in India that do this stuff today. And we were helping people put content on learning management systems, stuff like that, right? We were the largest. Um, at that point, we were a fairly successful business, 25% margins, no problem, growing at 49% CAGR. That was, although the base was small, it was a decent growth, right? But in 2008-9, something happened, right? There were two things that happened. One is there was an economic downturn in 2008 and 9, and so people had, a lot of funding went out of the system because of the downturn. The second thing that happened was Steve Jobs and his friends discovered the iPhone, the iPad, and the digital revolution began. So people in the education industry said, look, we don't want to buy $150 textbooks in the US. We want our content delivered on iPhone and iPads, and we now want it delivered at $20 or $30 a piece, right? This was a huge shift, right, in terms of the macroeconomic scenario. And I stepped back and I looked at the shift and I said, if I don't transform the company now, right, either, we'll be irrelevant in 1 or 2 years or 3 years, or, I would rather sell off this company today at $6 million and walk away and, I'm done, right? So we all sat down and we said, look, we had investors at that time in 2009. Carlyle was replaced by Helix Investment as the new investor. Sat down with our board and we chalked out a plan of restructuring the company. Now, what was the restructuring thing is that if people are going to convert vast amounts of content to digital interfaces for delivery on mobiles, iPads, different kind of consumption systems, we need to be technologically enabled. We need to create a platform that can, where you can author content, where you can store content, where you can curate and manage content, tag it, and at the press of a button, deliver it and distribute it to any interface, consumption interface or delivery channel that's possible. It was a big mission statement in 2009, honestly. It needed us to transform the company completely from a content-led company to a tech-led company. And we decided that we would basically do it. We would sacrifice growth, we would sacrifice profit in the ensuing years. But if we did that, right, we would be the leaders in the field. It was a very hard decision to turn the company around. I had to fire a lot of people, recruit a lot of new people, transform the company in a very different way. And as we started our journey in building this platform, you can see that, in the ensuing years from 2013 to 2019, our revenue was pretty flat, around 10% CAGR, because we put a lot of money into developing this IP. Now, this is the stage where we were a $6 to $8 million company. All the profits that we earned, we put it back into product development. But I will tell you how we put it back, because usually when you build a product, companies go and raise 10, 20, $30 million at the initial round of capital. We did not do that because we did not want to dilute equity. I have a slide later on which says how you can do it, how you can do world-class enterprise product development and conserve your capital as well. We went and partnered with our customer, and we convinced one of our large customers, Pearson, to partner with us in developing this platform. So they funded us. However, in the agreement, we made sure that we retained the IP and we could sell that IP forward, right? So our product development have been largely funded by most of our customers as well, right? And it's a tricky negotiation. You have to be very hard at negotiating all of this. But if you manage to do that, right, you can do product development or co-develop products with your customers in a very different ways, which is a win-win situation. And we give Pearson a revenue share back for some of the sales that we did for the next couple of years till that revenue share clause got sunset. As you can see in the ensuing years from now 2019 to 2020, 21, 22, this last year we closed at 62 million, and now our right now the financial year 2022-23 is going on. We will be going from 62 million. In an organic sense, we are closing at 80 million, and we are also doing a acquisition worth $20 million that will get us to about $100 million in size. So this is literally how that transformation happened in the middle, restructuring, hard decision, shifting the strategy. And today, for example, in the US in 2009, I had exactly 0 people. Today, we have built operation in the US, which is about, this slide is a little old. We have almost 150 people plus another 50 contractors, almost 200 people in the US. And then, so we have a huge consulting front end. So it became not only a tech-led business, but a consulting-led business. We launched our editorial business in the US, which is a high-end content business for higher ed and K-12. Our tech team, of course, grew from 15. Now it is about 500 or 600 plus people on the technology side between platform and other custom projects that we do. We launched 4 product lines, right? Quad, Ace, Go, Class, Frost. Out of that, 2 didn't work. 2 worked very well. Quad and Frost are our flagship products. So you've got to throw stuff on the wall. You don't know what will stick, right? And then we entered new market segments in this phase, which is we were largely a higher ed company. We went into the K-12 space, the government space, and the corporate space. So I think transformative years between 2012 to 2018-19, and then the growth years are now where it is, because you are reaping the benefits of now being a technology SaaS-led business rather than a content-led business, right? Now this is where I was saying I won't spend too much time. I think get your customers to fund your IP development. So you co-develop IP, but you retain the IP, you sell it forward, you have revenue share deals. This is the whole cycle of our developing IP in a low capex way, right? So all of you are designers, you will work on products, you will work on stuff, but just don't do a design project, right? If you do design for somebody, make sure you have a revenue share arrangement for like a royalty arrangement for everything that, the manufacturer does, you get a royalty back. In some shape and form, right? So we have always managed to do that, and therefore our businesses have become more annuity-based, more subscription-based, all of that. So I just don't want to spend time. I want to leave, time for questions and all of that. Early on in our cycle, of course, during 2008 or 2009. I realized that if you have to scale the org, you have to have focus on these process people, org design and culture. So we've done all sorts of ISO, CMMI, level 5 certification. Today, all of these things are in place. But the work for building the foundation began almost 12 years back. So today, when we are scaling to let's say from 2,000 to 4,000 people, we made sure that the foundations of the process people and org is laid way back, so that when things start to scale, you don't break, right? There is a big chance some of the organizations fail to scale effectively because they've not worked on these things. And if you don't work on these things, once you start getting enough business, you'll have a huge problem, because all the systems internally will break, you will lose people, and your deliveries will go south, customers will be unhappy, all of these things will happen. I have redesigned the org every 5 years almost to basically change the dynamics, as you saw through the restructuring phase also. Also, the one more thing I would say that, as the org grows big, hire professionals, and as a founder, move out of the day-to-day operations, because I myself didn't know how to manage people, right? I've not managed more than 50 people in my life. Today it's 2,000 people. So all 7 founders have moved into more biz dev roles, right? And we have gotten people from very large IT organizations who have kind of come and now taken on the operations. They run the operations, they run the day-to-day business. What I look after is largely culture, vision, and strategy, right? And nothing else. I don't interfere. I let the business grow. We've hired some very, very high-end people, and at some stage of the organization, you start handing it over to the professionals, right, and move out of the business. It's extremely important to do that. And finally, this is my last slide. I think I'll leave you with some tips on my experience with private equity. I can actually write a book. I've dealt with some of the largest private equity firms in the world, right? And our valuation rounds, the last one went at almost $320 million. This The big thing is that when private equity firms or venture capital firms work with you, the big issue is what is your valuation, right? And you'll never be able to agree on it. You feel your valuation should be much higher, they feel it should be lower. But if you basically go into the depths of it, I would say that create flexible put and call options. For those of you who are not familiar with these terms, I would suggest it's very easy. Go and read up, which means that you have an ability to basically claw back value if you perform to your expectations or better expectations, right? And if you don't, then the investor has call options on your shares, which basically they can call back those shares and they can cover up their losses if your business is not doing too well, right? So there is a way to do it. There are flexible structures. Investors are okay with these things, having ratchet mechanisms as well, having kickers. Also make sure that, when you deal with private equity, they will want to own majority of the company, which they do, but have differential voting rights, right? Which means even if you are a 20% shareholder, your vote will count for like more than 26%, which is 3/4 of majority. Or you could even have, like many companies in the US have differential voting rights, which give them majority voting, right? So they have a different class of shares, which basically give them higher differential voting rights. So while the investor may hold 70-80% of the company, the voting rights allows the founder to basically, vote for or against stuff at the board level. Also have independent directors other than the investor directors. Insist on that. People of reputation, I always insisted on that and had independent directors on my board, including an external chairman, which was jointly appointed by our investors and us. These are very fundamental things. I would leave you with some very top level ideas on how to construct your board, how to construct governance, and how to make money for yourself, right? I'll stop at that and take questions. I think in this time I could have spoken a lot more, but let me just stop here.
Wonderful, wonderful, Sam. Let's open the forum for questions, and please go ahead. Yes,
Sam,
Yes.
first of all, please take some time out and do write that book on how to raise capital and what is your experience with the private equity guys and how designers should go about kind of building bigger and bigger organizations, leveraging the PE bandwagon. Please do that.
Yeah,
And,
I will.
and absolutely very, very frank inside story of what you've gone through. Admire the way you have kind of been able to move to an unknown territory and then make it big there, and not holding anything as secrets from us, and then really bearing it all. Absolutely amazing attitude. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Gokul.
Very
And
inspiring.
yeah, hopefully, I wanted to share it because this is our family, right? IDC. So there are no secrets here.
So beautiful.
thanks, Gokul. And there is a question, Sam, in the chat room. Samyak wants to know you to share vision of LearningMate and the future of Edtech industry in general.
Okay, so for us, the vision of LearningMate is, we have today, if you look at what is happening in the world, at least in the US, and this is true for other parts of the world also. In the US, only 35% of the people in the US have a college degree. Right? You'll be shocked that 65% do not have the college degree, or have not been able to go to college, or have gone to college and dropped out. Right? So now there is a tremendous talent shortage in the world. Everybody knows that. Right? The enrollments in the US in the traditional colleges are declining by 1 to 2% every year, because it's a declining population at the end of it here, right? There are not enough kids coming into college. So the whole focus is on that 65% of the population that do not have a college degree and need to basically get trained or upskilled, because half the jobs that are there today will not be there tomorrow. Right. So every college is now working on what is called a workforce training or an extended campus. And you can see that, there are other edtech companies like Emeritus that have courses in data analytics and, AI and machine learning and this and that. So edtech companies are doing it. Colleges are also doing it. Now, leave aside the top 75 colleges in the US. The US has 4,000 colleges, right? 4,000. And there are about 2,000 to 3,000 colleges in the US that are struggling to go digital, that are struggling to make these courses and extended campus happening, that are struggling to deal with their technology and platforms, but which are not served properly. And this is a large greenfield area for us, right? And we want to be the leader in at least serving 1,000 universities in this space. Supporting them through their digital transformation process, and being able to, upskill and reskill at least millions of people who can then come back to the thing. So that is the future for LearningMate, and that is where we feel that we are growing at about 30% year on year. We are at $100 million of revenue this year. We will be, even if you half my growth at 14 or 15% annually, in the next 5 years, we'll be a $250 million company. And we are just completing 2 or 3 acquisitions with the capital raise that has happened with Barings. That should put us in the $300 to $350 million range. Of course, that will make us one of the largest edtech companies in the space. Although there are companies with much lesser revenues who claim billion-dollar valuations, I don't do that. But I'm not a fan of valuations. I'm a fan of actual revenue and profits.
There is a second part to the question, Sam, which is about your take on the future of the tech industry in general.
The future of the tech industry is, I think there are 2 or 3 things happening, right? The tech industry in the last 5 years has seen many people starting companies. Right from in India, you can see Byju's and X and Y and Z, and there are a list of 100, I think, or 200. I can't even count now. Many of these companies will go through what is called a churn. A churn meaning that many of them will not make it to the scale that they promised their investors. Already you can see Unacademy laid off 1,000 people just last week. There'll be a huge amount of consolidation in the space. Now, that said, the good thing is billions of dollars of capital have flowed into the tech industry. It is the industry that has received the most amount of private equity capital and venture capital in the last 3 years. Bigger than BFSI, bigger than data, bigger than anything else, right? Therefore, with so much money, right, with so much money in the sector, right, you will see a lot of innovative solutions come up in the edtech business. People will start making not only edtech companies like offering courses in all these areas like data, ML, AI, ML, and all these things. They are doing that. People are tying up with universities and offering university degrees. People are basically doing cross-border counseling. There are many, many sectors in edtech where you will find 1 or 2 leaders, right? And those leaders will grow tremendously big. So that, I think, will be the future. Also, as we have a changing workforce, college degrees will become less relevant. What will become more relevant to the workforce is what you can actually do or demonstrate. So if you look at what is happening in the industry. Like there are companies like Google and IBM and Philips and all, they have their own certifications. You can go and become a Google certified engineer, or you can go and become an IBM, whatever, right? Just like you had Cisco certification. These certifications or these things will become nano credentials, and those nano credentials can be stacked up into micro credentials and can get stacked up into degrees. So there will be alternative to college degrees as you kind of look out 10 years into the future, which will be more valuable than your traditional BA, BCom, whatever you kind of do, or even an engineering degree. That will have less relevance in the future. So all these things are going to change tremendously, right?
Great.
Thank you so much, sir, for such an informative answer. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Amyak. Yeah. Any more questions? Probably we have time for one more. Yeah, just a minute. More than our closing time. Any one question? The last question. Okay, this
At least one of my batchmates, Sharmila, on this call.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Hey,
Hey,
Sharma.
good to hear about your journey. It was an eye opener. I mean, when we meet, you're just buddies and you never really realize, the career path that you've chosen and how you have kind of grown. And, I'm super proud of you.
Hey,
Amazing.
Sharmila.
journey.
I didn't expect you here, but yeah, she's very close friends. Yeah. So guys.
Yeah, I made it a point to, put it in my calendar and join the call. Otherwise, I mean, as I said, we are always having casual conversations without realizing what we're doing in our professional lives. So it's really good to hear your story.
Thanks, Sharmila. Yeah.
Thanks, Shamla. I think with that, I think there is a. I think what Gokul said is what summarizes this whole session. A very transparent peek into to what went through your business, and it's a very different kind of a design entrepreneurship journey, because a lot of us talk about ideas and the breakthrough ideas, new things, but you actually spoke about the various stages in business, and those itself have tremendous potential for innovation, for thinking. And it's a business that is built on a certain opportunity, and how do you leverage that opportunity, and how do you put things come together to leverage that is a very different take on application of design and design concepts and design thinking. I think that way, Sam, it's a fabulous presentation, and we could really admire and understand what would have happened, and again very much imagine the various stages in your business and what kind of discussions and articulations and strategies must have gone through your team, and how you went about executing that. That way, very useful. And of course, the last bit was probably what is on the screen is probably something that a lot of budding entrepreneurs in the group, or somebody who know of somebody who is starting off, should actually take help of Sam. And I'm sure, Sam, you're available for any kind of guidance to any of us in the forum who wants to take your advice and suggestions on how to do this. I think it's very important. A lot of times we may get lost with things that we do, not realizing that in the long term, if we have to scale what matters. I think that's where your message has been extremely strong. And I know it has been very tough for you. You've been traveling so much, and all the chasing that we did with you was all worth it, I think.
Yeah, thanks for being patient. I mean, I traveled 20 days in a month almost, but thanks for being patient with that. Yeah.
Absolutely fabulous. And then, so we will, on behalf of all of us, is a very big thank you to Sam, and really wish LearningMate and your team a great deal of success. not only in terms of numbers, but it also in terms of how the impacts that I think is more than the numbers, the kind of impacts that you're going to create, especially pulling those 1,000, 2,000 universities from their level where they are to a level where they become very productive and impact. I know food, health, and education, I mean, are some things that you cannot live without, and education is very, very key. And the area that you are working is so important for the society at large. And wish them all our best, and hope to see you soon when the book is out on the we'll have a session on the release of the book in this forum. Thanks to all of you. Thanks to Sam. And we'll meet again next week. And the recording of this, I will get that posted as soon as it's ready. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody, and happy to help anyone reach out to me. And lovely speaking with all of you. Thank you so much again.
Wonderful. I'm stopping the recording, and we can have a chit chat if those of you have time.